You're trying to fix your team's performance, but the truth is you can't coach someone who isn't ready to be coached, and that includes ourselves. Most founders are reacting to the chaos of their day rather than leading with intention. If it feels like your culture is a fog of unspoken resentment and misaligned values, the bottleneck is not your strategy, it's the mindset you're bringing to the table. Meet Diana Urbina. She's the founder of Shero Solutions, and after 21 years at Microsoft, navigating the high-intensity culture of Steve Ballmer in the Xbox eras, she's here to reframe how we view growth. We dig into the Energy First framework, why you must optimize for energy before you ever touch performance tactics, the F word in business, how to stop the cycle of devastating feedback and start a culture of intentional alignment, and decisions versus beliefs, a practical spreadsheet method to recode the limiting patterns holding your leadership back. If you believe that leadership is just about managing outputs and encouraging hustle, you risk losing your people and your business. You cannot afford to ignore the internal code of your culture. It's time to stop the fog and start leading with clarity. Diana, can you just take a second and maybe talk a little bit more about the work that you do or the people that you work with to try to elevate their levels of performance?
Yeah, thanks, John. So I typically work with business owners, founders, and business leaders that are looking to really optimize. I really look at it optimizing their energy before they really think about optimizing performance. So we take a lens at how are they working, how are they thriving, and especially how is their team and the systems that they're in really thriving. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to look at like what's really working underneath all those performance tactics and what isn't.
Awesome. I'm very excited to talk with you because there's some very cool areas in your history that I would like to dive into and talk a little bit more. Um, but before we dive into the work that you're doing now, can you talk super loosely, super high level about the corporate work that you did for a very long time so everyone knows where you came from?
Yeah. So I was at Microsoft for 21 years. And I really look at that in three careers, if you will. I had my first like 7 years was doing database engineering and optimization. So started optimizing at a pretty young age, but optimizing like literally platforms, triggers, stuff like that. From that, I had this concept and this idea that, gosh, the processes sucked. So I started to go into process optimization, ended up landing in organizational design work in Microsoft IT, really looking at how do they shift from old school IT ticket taking sort of approach to a service management system. So did a lot of things, as you might know, in the organizational design and development optimization of people and roles and processes. And so that was my second. Then I had that aha moment where, oh, it's the people that are the issue. And it doesn't matter how many databases you fix, how many processes you fix. If the people are dysfunctional, we should start there.
Mhm.
And it happened because in the OD space in IT, I came across my first team coach. And he was helping. I don't know if you remember the reputation of Microsoft back in the 90s, but there was a lot of dysfunctional people, dysfunctional leaders, a lot of screaming, throwing things in conference rooms, all those things were
Oh,
happening. Yeah.
mm,
And so this do you remember that? Steve Ballmer days. Well, oh, maybe I
it's so
should
funny
have just
because I think this is much more about, like, age, like, I wasn't paying attention
Oh,
to any of these
yeah.
ideas about corporate or culture or, who to study or who to follow during those days, right? So, like, in my head,
Mm,
Microsoft has always just been an army of engineers and probably very low
interesting.
chaos people, and we're all just gonna, like, work and do what Bill Gates
Yeah.
tells us to do, but, I mean, of course, that's not the reality, right? I mean, people
Yeah.
are people under pressure output the way that they output, and it doesn't really matter if you're an engineer or not. You're either capable of handling the load or you're not, and bad things happen when you're not capable of handling the load.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was
Interesting.
so true. So that's what this team coach came in and did is he helped these leaders. I saw these leaders literally shift from being dysfunctional humans to being strong, kind humans. And I had this epiphany that not only were they being better leaders at work, they were being better husbands, better fathers, better members of their community. And I thought, I want to go do that. So
Hmm.
about that time, for my next 7 years, I shifted and I got a role in Xbox working on culture transformation. So I kind of took the OD stuff and the team coaching stuff and looked at internally, what do we need to shift about the internal culture? The diversity and the inclusion kind of practices of that team is a lot of D&I back then.
Hmm.
Um, in order for them to shift their brand from a middle-aged 30s Cheeto eating, soda drinking white guy sort of primary client base into this brand that they really want to do, which is a place where everybody feels safe and can have fun. So there's this big campaign around gaming for everyone. So I did a lot of intentional culture shifting coaching and processes and techniques. And
Interesting.
yeah, so then after that, I went on to my little second career at Blanchard.
Okay. So it sounds like, to put a pin on it, it sounds like you realized that people could shift and got super excited about it and went all in on that.
Totally. All in.
Interesting.
Went back to school and got my psych degree after having my
Whoa,
computer science degree too. Yeah, that was fun.
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. What now? I can imagine that when you're working on culture at Xbox, right? You're probably coming in a little hot, right? You're very excited about it. You're going to change the world. You're gonna win everybody over and everything. What was it like trying to be that like agent of change in a major, big, huge corporation like that?
Hmm. Um, yeah, as with any like people change effort, it's a long game, right? It's a
Mm,
long game because I really think about any behavior shifting has 3 stages. The first one is awareness, right? Really becoming aware like, "Oh, this is how I behave and this is how I'm impacting the system around me. And this
mhm,
is what I have control over." Part of that awareness too is, "Oh, this is how other people perceive me. It's I'm not showing up the way I think I'm showing up." A lot of times people don't even get there because they're not willing to get the perspective of other people. They just trust they know. They
mm,
know. And then you have
mhm,
that devastating 360 feedback one day and it just wrecks your world.
mhm,
So, there's that process of how do we teach people how to get feedback. I absolutely despise the word feedback. I think it's the F word in business. I try not to say it in any way, shape, or form. I use a lot of other creative ways to say it so that people can get the perception and the information that they really need to understand. So in a culture shift, it's a lot of that work, right? That be aware of how you're behaving, both your own default behaviors and thoughts, and then how other people perceive you. Then we have to work on the whole alignment, like shifting those behaviors. That's
mhm,
step 2. Practicing new things, that takes a while. And then the third one is making sure that other people are experiencing you different and believe and trust in you. So if you think about the normal corporate leader, they have to go through those 3 stages to shift
mhm,
and make sure that they're getting the intentional culture shaping that they want to. So, yeah, it can take a while.
yeah. It's always like one of the things that I kind of try to talk about in my work is, everyone is expecting, the sales consultant, trainer, coach, whatever, to be able to come in and immediately like right the ship, right?
Mm,
And even if they don't think that way, there's always this kind of weird, well, let's do a seminar, let's do a workshop, and if that's good enough, then we can talk about training. But it's like, okay, we're just going to confuse people for a couple of hours, and then we're going to send them back. Behaviors won't change, outputs aren't going to change, and then you're gonna have a really great reason to be like, "Oh, yeah, this didn't work," right? When that team coach came into Microsoft, right, the person that kind of set this world on fire for you, how long
yeah.
were they there before you started to see these changes, right? The cooler heads, the more methodical approach?
I think usually it's about 6 months, but it was about 6 months before I started to see, "Oh, that leader's now listening to me. He's asking me questions. He's not
Mhm,
just running through the hallway, as fast as he can. He's paraphrasing. He's he's checking in on how I reacted to what he's proposing, right? So that
mhm,
was about 6 months, but I would say it was about 12 months in that I trusted, like I saw them as a different person. I felt
yeah,
like I could walk into their office. I felt like, if I proposed something, I wasn't at risk of just being shot down or having my ego crushed forever, right?
Mhm.
So, about 6 months, you start to go, "Huh, I'm noticing things," and about 12 months, I started to trust that they were really different.
Yeah. Like, no one changes on a dime,
Yeah.
right? And, it's one of the things that I kind of am always concerned about when people are looking to potentially work
Mhm.
with me of like, okay, how much time are we going to put towards the improvement and the awareness of these things that we're trying to do? Because if you're expecting it to be tomorrow and everyone's going to be different, we should probably just not try this at all.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
change takes longer than people think that it does.
Yep.
Um, so okay, so question then: do you think that in this work of coaching and transforming people and getting them to become aware and be thoughtful, do you? And this is just me being the weirdo that I am. Like, do you think we can do it in less than 6 months? Like, do you think that there's ways of doing it, or do you think it just makes more sense to just focus on a timeline that does work, even if it's longer? Because everybody wants it faster once they become aware that there's room to improve.
It depends, right? Don't you love that answer? It
Mhm.
depends.
Yeah, uh-huh, yeah. Are you in
Um,
sales?
right? I think it depends on the eagerness of the people.
Oof,
The person, right?
yeah. Mhm,
So if you've got somebody that thrives on self-development, personal development, growth, and they're just hungry for figuring out how do I shift? What do I need to learn? What do I need to practice? I want to change my behaviors yesterday. If
mhm.
they're hungry for it, you can you can get them to speed it up, but you still then have the perception of other people. It's a trust building time.
Oh,
And I know there's this beautiful equation about the speed of trust around like credibility, likability, and kind of motivation that makes people more trustworthy or another. So so much of it depends on the foundation you're working with for how others are going to experience you.
mhm.
And then it kind of just depends on if you're working with a whole system needing to shift, how dysfunctional was the system before? Because I think, John, like I said, the thing that's going to determine whether you can do it quicker or faster is all based on trust
Yeah,
in in each other, in the prior culture that you're trying to shift or the prior way of being that the system was. If it was horrible and dysfunctional and everybody's guarded, that's just going to take human time for people
yep.
to see things different.
Mhm.
But if it's a really positive place and there's just a few funky tweaks to make, yeah, you could probably do it quite a bit quicker. So
That's
I
interesting. It
think the
makes
hard
me
part is telling somebody that they're the really dysfunctional screw up that's going to take a long
oh,
time.
yeah, right. Because there's a line that I really like, and I'm probably gonna butcher it, and I don't know who to attribute it to, it's not mine, but it's like, "No one is excited to change until they can understand why the change is needed."
Yeah.
Right? So if you're talking to that brass tacks manager who thinks that by being brass tacks and not having any empathy is leading to their success, they're not going to be excited about change at all. And then they're dragging their heels and the whole thing takes even longer.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
have you gotten better at, I call this getting buy-in from people? Because like now as a coach, right? Now out here
Yeah.
working on your thing full time, this is the sales process, right? How do you get people open to the idea that there's room for them to improve?
I don't know if you're gonna like my answer.
Oh, okay. Let's get spicy.
I don't.
Oh, okay, dip. I'm with this. Okay, can you talk a little bit? I think I know
Yeah.
where you're gonna go, but I'm curious,
Okay.
right? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Um, there is a fundamental philosophy to coaching that you cannot coach somebody that is not ready to be coached.
Oh, 100%. I have tried many
Right?
times, and it always ends up being more frustrating for me than it is for them,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. And so I only work with people that are bought into it in the first place. W- you are sent, we call it problem child or high risk coaching or whatever you want, where companies will want you to fix somebody.
Mhm.
Coaching is not the right answer for that.
Agreed.
Um, People truly have to have goals that they want to achieve and be motivated to accelerate those goals. And that's typically where coaching starts.
Mhm.
Now, you can get people to buy into their own behavioral shifts and change by focusing on the acceleration of those goals and outcomes that they are really motivated by, and then you can connect the behavior shift to that. That's
Mhm.
typically how I would get buy-in to somebody that I feel like is bought into the whole process and idea of coaching.
Yeah.
Um, but if somebody is coming to coaching or I'm being told to convince them that coaching is gonna, like, change their lives,
Mhm.
peace out.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna bother.
I love that. I don't hate that at all, actually,
Okay,
right?
good.
Because, you know, it's 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 harder, I would say, when you're selling coaching and you're the salesperson and the coach, right? Because we have to put some effort in there. We are trying to kind of win over hearts and minds and get people to kind of be
Totally.
open, right? Awareness of the problem is the thing that is very hard for people to do. But by that
Yeah.
same time, the hardest thing for me is to like and I put a lot of work into this of like finding that line sooner. Okay. They do not want help. They think they're going to be fine. And if you think you're going to be
Yeah,
fine, you're not going to hear anything that I have for you. Right. And I talk about this with like lots of people because I tell people that because of this thing that I sell, this is the best approach for me. But if you have a product that you can put in their hands, it's okay to
mm,
be a little bit more assumptive, a little bit more direct, because if they can put their hands on it and see if it meets their expectations, that's way better than, a deck or a slideshow or presentation. But this thing that you and I do with people, we
yeah,
can't just put it in their hands, right? And the harder I try to get someone to admit that they're not having the outcomes and the success that they want, the more likely they are to dig in as to like why I just don't get it. So I'm very similar to you in the fact of like, hey, if you don't think you need me, you're right, because we're not going to get anything done. There's not going to be any
yeah,
improvement coming from our time spent together, right? And so anybody who kind of shows themselves to be that kind of person, my job is to find that as soon as possible and save the time, as opposed to trying to convert
that's it,
someone that doesn't want to be converted.
that's it, totally. And going back to what you said around, how do you connect with them? And it's the same, it's through their pain points. Like,
Mhm.
if I can connect with, "Look, I get that you're having this struggle in your life, in your business at this point. Would you like to consider a different approach, that might get you where you're trying to go instead of that same approach, that same outcome, that new framework, that new, like, shiny bell or whistle?" Um,
Mhm.
yeah, that's the conversation you gotta have with them, and if they can come to the realization, "Yeah, this might be helpful for me," or, "I'm willing to have a conversation," that's great. But still, if they're not interested,
Mhm.
yeah, you gotta wait till they are.
Exactly, right? And, I love that you talked about, like, goal setting and stuff. They have to want more, right?
Yeah.
My and I wasn't good at this in my first couple of, projects, but, now I know to, disqualify anybody who's like, "Oh, I need to come fix my salespeople." They're probably fine. You're probably the
Mhm.
bigger problem, but you are already showing yourself to be someone that's not taking a lot of ownership about the things that are happening inside of the team, right? And so now I kick those people to the curb and I'm like, "No, I can't help you," and stuff like this. But, it comes down to, is this person, do they want more for themselves, right? And that's where
Yeah.
I wasn't great at this for my first couple of years of working with individuals, but now everything starts with that goal setting process, right? Like, where do you wanna be? What are your goals? Because if you
Yep.
don't want more for yourself, like, what are we doing here? Kinda thing.
It reminds me, like, when I'm given a high risk kind of employee or, a problem child, we call it that in kind of the
Mhm.
coaching inner circles of somebody to go fix through coaching,
That was me, like
I
ten
tell
whole years
them
of it.
I tell them I won't coach them, but I'll coach their leader
Mhm.
on how to help work on his management, her management approach with them to help move them to higher performance. Because you just hit the nail on the head that oftentimes it's a leader employee dynamic, or if nothing more, you can coach the leader so that the next time they have a problem child situation, they are way more equipped to handle it. But just trying to go in and quote, fix that individual through coaching isn't the right approach. So I was just
Agreed.
thinking about that when you were talking about the sales team versus that sales leader, when you're like, yeah, you're part of the system. You got to be all in on this or
Yeah,
it's not going to
100%.
work.
Yeah, they're taking all their cues, all their direction from you, and you don't think you're playing any part in the output that's coming from the
Yeah.
team that you manage. Like, isn't that convenient? That it's not your fault when they're losing, but you get all the praise when they're winning? That's a little weird.
Yeah, totally. And no
Um,
responsibility for the culture you're setting because you know you said it, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Like, one of the because of the realm that I work in, right? It's, sales, and I talk with, like, a lot of, uh, what's a polite way of putting this? People who don't think that culture is important, right? And they
Yeah.
don't really talk about it. They don't put any kind of intentional effort into it. And the thing that I have to tell everybody is like, you have a culture no matter what, right? Even if you're not putting any
Mm.
effort into it, it's probably just not one that anybody else wants to be in, which is why you're not keeping people, which is why everyone is leaving and stuff like this, right?
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you get people to be more thoughtful about the culture and the example that they set with their teams?
Well, I think what we're often up against when we talk about culture is nebulous, right?
Mhm.
It's until you break it down for them. You've got I always find that with my clients, I have to give them really tangible things on what is culture because culture is just everywhere. It's the air we breathe. And so I
Mhm.
start with them writing down what are the social norms here? Like, what are the expected normal behaviors? And then, more importantly, what's rewarded around
Oh.
here, right? Because we'll get a lot of leaders that come and say, we want a growth mindset culture. And then I'll talk to them about how many mistakes have been made recently and what happened with the person that made the mistake
Ooh.
or to the person. Like what messages were sent? How much learning came from that?
Mhm.
Because if that person made a mistake and they're no longer at the company, those things kind of got to shift before you're going to have a growth mindset company. Like people don't feel
Yeah.
safe making mistakes and learning from it because if they openly make a mistake, they're out.
Mhm.
So starting with those just really tangible examples, then people start to understand, oh, that's what you mean by culture. Because until then, everybody just has a different story in their head about what this new thing in the last 15 years about everybody talking about culture really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that is mind blowing. I'm gonna make a note. Like, what is rewarded?
Yeah. Rewards. When we did the culture shifting in at Microsoft between
Mhm.
Steve Ballmer and Satya, and then when we were working on the culture shift, specifically in the Xbox organization, it was a lot of that. It was so the main tactic that I use is set up grassroots activities around the behaviors that you want to see, and then executive comes in and rewards the behaviors that they see that reinforce the desired culture and those behaviors.
Epic.
And it's that reward reinforcement and highlighting of that that makes everybody go, I just think about it even in psychology and families. It's like what dad rewards, is what the kids are gonna try to shine and go do.
Mhm.
And so it's the same in family cultures and community cultures and in corporate cultures.
It's I'm kinda just floored at this idea of, like, what gets rewarded and everything, and I really love the example, right? Because, everyone talks about these businesses and they're, like the Facebook, move fast and break things. Okay, great.
Yeah.
But if everyone is getting fired because they're trying new things, that's not actually the culture that you're in, you know?
Yeah.
And, I read a book, and I think it was, Radical Candor. I think this was the book, and she was
Mm.
talking about the different cultures, at maybe Apple. and maybe Google, right? But like
Mm,
two big,
mhm.
huge companies, right? And she was talking about just how different the culture was, right? And one of them moving fast and it being like an MVP was lauded, right? But in
Yeah,
the other culture, if you show up with something that's like held together with like, tape and paper clips or whatever, you're going to get ridiculed, right? And so just in that little thing in the example that you're talking about, what a beautiful way to kind of think about it, right? Because like my biggest frustration is whenever I go talk to someone, right? And I'm like, okay, you're working on culture. Like, what are your values? What's important to you? And it's always like the base level table stake stuff. Well, customer service. Okay, well, great. So is everybody else. And I think it takes a lot of time to get to that place to where you can really define it. But I love that shortcut of the things that you're excited to praise, either behaviorally or outdo or outcome wise
yeah,
are really the beginnings of the culture that you're trying to build. That's
yeah,
dope. That's so good. I love
yeah.
that. Oh, right. Because
Thanks.
it's like like I'll get frustrated whenever I'm like, okay, what's important to you? Doing the right thing. Okay, that's everybody. Congratulations. Like what's deeper than that? And largely just because I'm trying to figure out how to fit in or how to find the right people because, for sales hiring, a lot of people kind of overshoot the mark because everyone's looking for this super opportunistic hunter who's going to go close every door. But in certain situations, that's the worst person to have on your team, right? You need someone a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more strategic. And
Yeah.
so, but it's always weird because sometimes I show up and I'm like, "Hey, what's your culture like, and what are your values?" And they're like, "John, aren't you in sales? Like, does this even matter to you?" And it's like, "Well, it should matter to everybody, but, we'll talk about that in another conversation." But I just love the idea of, like, focusing on, like, what gets rewarded, what gets praised, what gets this positive,
Yeah,
output.
what gets people motivated around you? Like, what are people incented by?
Mhm,
Is kind of the reward side, and the other side is, what are those hidden expectations or shame things around here that people would never do? Or if
hmm,
people do them, they're trying to hide it because it would bring them so much shame and embarrassment or would be so out of the norm around here
mhm.
that, that they do it, behind closed doors or something like that, and so those are kind of the 2 opposites that are your interesting culture defining elements
Mhm.
that people don't really know how to describe until you ask those questions.
So this is kind of a weird question potentially, right? But we talked about 360 feedback. I'm personally not a huge fan of 360 feedback myself
Mm,
because if someone has I've only done a handful of these things, right, in my time in corporate, but whenever someone would say something under the veil of anonymity, right, and then I would be like, "Well, I'm gonna go work on this thing," but I wasn't allowed to go seek that person out. Like that's the frustrating thing for me.
sure.
That's largely an aside. Do you think that the metrics that you track have an impact on the culture that you create?
I'm gonna go back to, again, rewards or consequences. It depends.
Okay.
You can track metrics all you want and have it up on a screen, but if they're just on a screen and it's just information and people are numb to it, it's
Mhm,
not gonna have an impact. But if there's some result about those, some outcome, so when the sales numbers are high, people are celebrated. When the sales numbers are low, people look like literally have an optimization conversation about it,
mhm,
and people know that, they're gonna be talked about, on a regular basis, then yeah, it becomes part of the cultural expectation that those metrics are gonna have a big part of that. So
hmm,
it just depends what's done with it. If they're just on a piece of paper in the conference room, no.
yeah, okay, yeah, because like, I think sales side, right, your culture is largely defined by the metrics that you look towards, right? So if everything's just about close rate,
To
you're probably
look
gonna have a
towards.
very
Yeah.
yeah, very, old school Wolf of Wall Street style, you can't tell me nothing because I'm crushing quota kind of thing. But if it's what can we keep? Who's staying? Right? Not just what we
Mhm.
close. It's, are they finding value from this thing? There's ways of measuring that. But if no one wants to measure it or no one wants to like make that part of the sales incentive plan, comp plan, they're not going to.
Yeah.
And so I love that line. If it's just a piece of paper, if it's just on a screen, it probably isn't that helpful as like a barometer.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Goes back to behavior, what's rewarded and what's against the norm.
Yeah. So moving forward a little bit, right? We had our pre-call about this, and we were kind of talking about your path and how you got to here and everything. And you left Microsoft and Xbox, and you worked for a coaching company for a while, right? And you said
Yeah.
this line that you didn't feel like you were ready, or maybe you didn't feel like you were enough to go out on your own yet. Did it feel like that in the moment, or was it more just like, I'm done, I'm done with this, it's on to my next thing?
Yeah, so when I left Microsoft, I was in a position where I was exploring going out on my own, and I was terrified.
Mm,
Um,
mhm.
I was terrified mostly because I had spent my entire adult career thinking that salespeople were amazing, magical, and had the hardest job in the world, and I never, ever, ever wanted to do sales,
Most people don't, honestly.
right?
Yeah.
So the fact that I found a job leading the executive coaching organization of it was a global leadership development company,
Mhm.
and I had this 6 to 7 years in the consulting industry, which was, as you can imagine, very different from a mega software development company. It was beautiful training now that I look back. It was exactly what I needed to be able then to feel comfortable going out on my own, and not only that, to shift my mind from it's not sales, it's being in deep service of others. And
Mm.
so I don't look now at what I do in the particular field that I'm in, which I think is, of course, the best, most magical field to be in now, right? I never approach a conversation as a sales conversation. I approach a conversation of how can I be of value? How can I be of service? And sometimes it's both. It's a give and take sort of situation, but
Mhm.
that really helped me. And I wasn't there 7 years ago, so I didn't know that that was a great path for me to go on. It just happened to be like what I feel like I was gifted 6 years of preparation for finally going out and being a founder.
I l I love that, because one of the things that I talk about with people is how easy it is to embody the negative thinking about salespeople, right? Like,
Yeah.
I even know people that are employing salespeople that have got this idea, well, if I
Oh, it's
pay you too
sad.
much, you're gonna get lazy, or you're just here for the money, and all these things that people say about salespeople and stuff. And while there is that group of people, by and large, more are of the higher approach in my experience of them, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a pretty small window in time of a salesperson who stays in sales coming in thinking that they can just bulldoze people into the yes, right? Like, those people flame out, they go find something else to do, and things like that. Anyone who has decided to kind of make this lane their lane, right, and approach it like a craft and stuff like this, that's the first mindset shift that has to happen, is that you're not here to, like, try to manipulate people into the yes. Your whole job is to find your people, right?
Yeah.
And that means that
Mhm.
a lot of people are gonna be sifted out. You know, one of my things that I kinda think about all the time is the concept of the marketing funnel, right? And it's so popular, right? Everyone talks about it and everything, but, you know, people can bounce out between these stages, right? But people think of it as a funnel and they're like, "Well, if it goes in the top, it must come out the bottom." And it's like, that's not exactly how this
All
works.
100%. It gets smaller at the bottom for a reason, right?
Exactly, yeah. Well, that just means that they're in the hopper. No, it might mean that they hopped out at the
They
decision
hopped.
stage because you didn't have it, right? And so this thinking that, like, well, because you came in the top of the funnel, because you liked the post, because you filled out the form, therefore, like, you must convert, is pretty flawed thinking in the grand scheme of things, right? But I would wager that most people kinda have that same thinking. So, was there something specific that you learned or you saw or you experienced that helped you get out of that mindset of, sales is this other thing and something that you could do naturally?
I had a couple of really good coaches.
Oh,
And, John, it was honestly mindset shifts, right?
mhm,
I'll give an example, um, and I will love my coach forever for this one. I'd send an email to a potential ideal client that I knew I could really help them with what they were struggling with.
Mhm.
And when they would not reply to me, my story was there was something about my email that wasn't
Mm.
of this or that. I would tell my story about how they basically deleted my email because it wasn't worth their time.
Mhm.
His story was I always follow up in 3 or 4 days because I believe that they just got distracted. They really wanna talk to me, and they appreciate my follow-up to keep it top of mind in their inbox.
Mm.
And I was like, "Dang, I want that perspective."
When you see those things, right, and I'm just kinda curious as to your experience with this, right, and you see someone that is embodying a mindset like that,
Yeah.
how do you go about concreting that mindset for yourself? Like, do you journal? Do you reflect? Do you Stuart Small yourself? I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. Like, how do you and how have you gotten better about this, right? Because I think it's super easy to see people and see an example and want it, but not really have any way of like making that change come through for you.
Oh, I have a very intentional process.
Oh.
Um, I do meditation every morning, and I work on what's called limiting beliefs and empowering decisions, and so I have this, like, little spreadsheet. I'm a
Mhm.
spreadsheet girl back to the database days. Um, and I have my limiting belief, so that shitty thing I'm thinking of that I just said, and then
Mhm.
this new empowering way to believe because all of our limiting beliefs, I believe, they're decisions that we made at some point in our life. So we
Mhm.
decided this bad thing. Now we hear this good thing that we could just decide instead. But to your point, it takes practice. So I try to only have like 4, maybe 5 at most. So as I add another shift that I need to make, I have to kind of decide, is that a big shift I want to make in my life? And in that
Mhm.
particular time, this was a big one for me, right? Because I'm building my business, I'm doing this new thing. And so whatever else was on my little shitty thinking list, I had to kick it into the other bucket
Yeah.
and put this one in there. And so then every morning I spend a few minutes reading my empowering decision, reading my empowering decision, reading my empowering decision until I start to read that and go, I don't even believe this other limiting decision that I used to make.
Oh, game game
Yeah.
changer. Like,
Yes.
my coach spent 2 years telling me to journal, and I was like, "I don't need it," right? I'm just supposed to learn these tactics and techniques from you, and then I'm gonna be able to close these deals and everything. And he was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, that's not really why we're here." Like, I had a really great coach and, really appreciate now how much extra patience he was putting into me because I'm a fairly rigid person, right? I think I got everything figured out. And, that concept, like, I love the idea of having it on a spreadsheet because then you can put in the BS belief on one side and then, like, okay, how do we reframe this as a
Yeah.
positive, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can remember sitting in that classroom and him being like, "Okay, what is the thing that you think causes, the frustration? Like, why do you think these things happen to you and everything?" And then I remember writing it, and then I remember being so stumped of like, how do I turn this into a positive? Like, there's no positive version of this thing, right? And one of the things that I started to write was because like I had this belief that I was trying to free my monetary concept, right? We're getting a little
Mm.
deep here because one of the
Mhm.
things about money is that it is a concept that's very subjective to the individual. And my coach always had this line that if you think the $350,000 house is expensive, you won't ever sell the $350,000 house, right? And so one of the things that I was always working on is like, okay, what is my value? What am I worth? And I
Mm.
started to do this thing of I would say my experience, my knowledge, my network, and my abilities are worth X. What I would do is I would pick a dollar amount that would make me wildly uncomfortable, and I would write it until it would no longer be wildly uncomfortable, and then I would raise the number, and I did this for a while, right? But, like, this is how I was having to do it, like, way back in the day. Now, I would say that, first of all, I think we've come a long way as far as, like, actually being even open to looking for limiting beliefs, right? If you're
Mhm.
working with a coach or working with a great leader and stuff like this, they're hopefully helping you do these things. But with all like the AI tools now, like we
Yeah.
have this opportunity to go find any perception or belief that's holding us back and work on it and everything. But to the point that we've been kind of talking about it the whole time, we have to decide that that work is valuable and worth it, right? And that we're not just victims of unlucky circumstance.
I think, so much of it though is having that person. It doesn't have to be a
Oh,
coach, although I think
yep.
coaches are amazing at it. But the person that will even question, like he at least had I had that person in my life to say, "So when you go to do that, what are you telling yourself?" Because it's so subconscious that
Mhm.
oftentimes we have all these beliefs. What I love too about the process I explained to you is I changed from calling it limiting beliefs, which feels so ethereal, right, to
Yeah.
decisions. And then my other column is new decision because
Mm,
decisions feel like you're in control of it and it's
yeah.
it's just a shift. I decided to have lunch at Burger King today. Now I know that's terrible for me. Tomorrow I'm going to have, lunch at Qdoba because it feels a lot better.
Mhm.
Just a decision. And so by having it be a decision and having somebody else just ask you, what are you saying to yourself when you go to send those emails? You're able to then
Oh,
say, I don't have to have that decision anymore. I can simply adopt this new decision. And to your point, we're much more open to talking about it now. And so
yeah,
having somebody in your life that will do that with you in the places that are most critical for you to
yeah.
shift right now, game changer.
The nugget there that I'm, like, being blown away by is whenever I was doing this with my coach, it was just the belief and how I'm gonna talk about myself in the new state. The thing that
Mhm.
I hope everyone is paying attention to is you're talking about that when I think of it this way, I can then take these actions, right? And that pulls
Yeah.
it out of this very, ethereal thing of like, well, I'm just not gonna beat myself up anymore, and like actually putting it into like output kind of driven, like when I think about this way, I'm not able to do these things, but when I think of myself this way, it opens up the opportunity for me to act this way. I love that idea of taking it to the action step of like now that I am this person, I think about myself these ways, these actions are going to become easier for me to do or even just accessible.
And honestly are just as true, if not truer, than the old story that you had,
Yeah.
right? The old
Yeah.
decision you made around finding clients is hard. That was my
No.
story.
Uh-huh. Yes,
And now my
exactly.
story is I have conversations with people all the time about what they're struggling with.
Hmm.
And so just finding a match between the value I provide and the value that they're looking for, that's something I do every day. So that
Yeah.
was my new decision was is just having conversations,
Just
and that
conversations.
shifted
Yeah.
everything. So I could see also for a C and disc, just it's just was this replace with this.
Mhm. Yeah. Right. And like, what's so funny is like, I'm trying to, one of the things that got me into journaling, right? Even after like my coaches telling me to do it and my business partner telling me to do it and me being so resistant to it, the thing that got me to do it, and this is the silliest thing ever, but like, talk about hearing it just the right way. There was a person and they were saying that Macs and PCs function on the same core materials, right? Circuit boards, right? And
Mhm.
these things. What makes them operate different is how they're coded, and if you're not doing a thing like journaling, you're not looking at your own code. And it was super
Oh,
weird, but I
that's
was
cool.
like, "Whoa." And that was the thing. Like the next day I was like, "Okay, let's see if
Not
I'm
looking at
coding
your
myself to be a PC or coding myself to be a Mac and everything." But it took that conversation on the back of hundreds of other conversations and nudges and pushes and stuff like that. But the minute I saw it that way, right? They're the exact same machine. They have the same core components. The difference is in how is in the commands, right?
that's cool.
And how they're handled. And I was like, that I'm in. Let's go figure it all out, right? And then it became a little too nutty about it and couldn't shut up about it, kind of like a vegan CrossFitter, if you will. Um, and then eventually it kind of settled into just this delightful little habit that helps me and keeps me on the path that I want to be on.
That's
Um,
cool.
changing gears just a little bit because we talked about this one thing, and I want to make sure we kind of talk about this. You said that during your time in corporate, you were very focused on being heads down, right? Pushing,
Oh.
getting the wins, leading to the accolades that you're looking for and everything. And that the thing that you said that really jumps out at me was like you were in a bit of a fog, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about the shift and how you think about networking and conversations now versus how you were thinking about it when you were in that fog?
Thank you for remembering this, because it is literally my favorite thing about being out on my own now, as I call it. So yeah, when I tend to be a little bit on the introverted side. Every assessment I've taken, whether it's DISC or Myers Briggs or something else, I'm just under the cusp of the introverted extroverted sort of divider.
Mhm,
And what I didn't know, well, while I was working for a large company,
mhm,
all of my energy was spent, yeah, driving toward those results, leading my team, connecting with them, having relationships with them. So by the time that I was done at the end of the day, which was too long of days, I literally avoided anything that was community related, anything that was volunteer related, anything social, other than, close family and friends.
mhm.
Because I simply just didn't have any energy, and so when I started to go out on my own, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've gotta learn how to talk to strangers." That was the first thing, but then I literally have had the capacity to connect with people. So one of my favorite stories is, like, I went down to Albertsons, a local grocery store in our small little
Mhm.
town, and I talked to the cashier about what she was struggling with, and I came back home and I told my husband, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I spoke with the cashier today. She's so lovely. Do you know about that?" And he just looks at me, he's like, "Who are you? And what have you done with my wife?" And so it was like that epiphany that I realized how much energy I had, capacity I had, and joy I had. And so what I had shared with you is like, it was like I lifted my head out of the fog of this one company mission. And now I get to be a bigger part of this big, beautiful world with all these humans in it that is just this ebb and flow that just naturally works and I get to be a part of. So I have so much more joy in this process now.
I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question without, like, leaning the witness, right? Because, I'm a big believer now in the line that if you do something you love, you don't actually work a day in your life, right? I
Mm.
used to hate this line whenever, like, managers would say it to me and try to pep me up and everything. Do you think you would have found this gear of being open to people and being, a confident conversationalist if you had not shifted around the idea of, "I'm just here to help people," like, and I'm doing good work?
No, I mean, I really needed to connect the dots that people saw conversations with me as valuable as I saw it with them, right? I
Whoa.
had to make that pivot before I could see it as before I could come across not needy, if
Mm,
that makes
mhm.
sense,
Yeah,
or not um shy or insecure, which people just pick up on
yeah.
and they just pat you on the head.
Mhm. Yep.
A little bit, right? So those 2 had to go together, right? Me seeing the value I was bringing to the world by stepping into this work and connecting with the world in this way and believing that my value would be seen as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Changing gears again, because you talked about we talked a little bit about not feeling ready, and so we took the job at the coaching company, right, before going out on our own and everything. Um, you mentioned this one thing in our pre-call. You talked about that how you left these 2 roles were really the things that kind of, cemented that you should go out on your own. Can you talk a little bit
Mhm.
more about how that showed up for you, kind of like how you were treated as you were exiting these companies and how that kinda led you to feeling comfortable in going out on your own?
I'm trying to think about how to respond to this from there's a saying in coaching, talk about the scar. Talk from the
Mm.
scar, not from the wound.
Ooh, that's a great line.
Um, here's what I'll say. This has been a direct result of how I've shaped my particular company today. So my particular company structure
Mhm,
is I have one employee, an assistant, and everybody else I structure intentionally as partners.
hmm,
Because to me, when a company starts to grow bigger and bigger, I actually call it the power pyramid because you have, if you're in like a top executive position, let's say you're a VP
mhm,
and you've got your C suite above you, you spend so much of your energy trying to communicate with that top level.
mhm,
At the same time, you spend a lot of your energy trying to navigate resources and prioritization with your peers, but also be sweet, loving, and kind and work together like good collaborative partners. And so there's
mhm,
this constant tension there. And at the same time, you're spending a lot of energy with all the various personalities on your team and making sure that they're all thriving and loving. All those D's, those I's, and those S's, and those C's, and all the combination of them compared to your combo.
mhm,
So that's where it goes the energy that I mentioned of like it's a lot. It's a lot of energy, and I can see why there's so much conversation right now about exhaustion and burnout and stuff because that's just the way that corporate structures are set up.
mhm,
And so that was really what we were talking about before, like that motivated me more than anything that I want to do work in the world differently than being in that environment.
epic.
Yeah.
Wow. So, okay, I have a question then. We're getting really crunchy here actually, right? So, after working in big corporate, and knowing that, because this is the line that you just said, that corporate isn't really, well, it just has a tendency to burn people out, right? Because you just always kind
Yes.
of like ask for more. If you do you think there's room to have a culture that like rewards, like self-care, taking time for yourself, showing up as your best self, and still being able to drive revenues for our stakeholders and shareholders? Like, do you think that those things are two like mutually exclusive things?
Yes and no. I mean, they they very much can be and very easily can be two different things.
Mm,
Because if you're checking out and going on vacation, you're not generating like just from a logical perspective, right? You're not
mm,
generating revenue potentially depending on how you set your team up and how you optimize your culture. So that goes us full circle back to our first conversation around leaders and culture and what's rewarded. And so I think it has to truly go beyond just rewarding people for taking certain days off. Like you have to look at what self-care means to different people.
mm,
Um, and that's what a lot of my coaching actually focuses on because of my past is working with executives on energy optimization and what that means for each person. So not only is their day to day optimized for their own wellness and well-being, it's so that they can work in a way that promotes wellness instead of we got to work and drain ourselves and then go off in self-care and then we got to work and drain ourselves,
mhm.
right? We have to be more thoughtful in this world about how do we do sustainable work.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
I love that. I was working on a project and the CEO, he goes, "John, can you hang out after the call?" It's like, "Yeah, sure, hanging out, not a big deal." And he goes, "Okay, maybe we gotta talk about something." I said, "Okay, what do you want to talk about?" And he's like, "You talking about people about self-care?" I said, "Yeah, I am." And he goes, "Well, John, I think I got a problem with that." And I was like, "Okay, let's talk about it. Why do you have a problem with it?" And what he was worried about was what they were doing before, right? They were pushing themselves to the limit and then being so exhausted and
Oh.
burnt out and everything,
Mm.
then they needed to take PTO, and take some time off to kind of recharge and everything. And I was kind of like, okay, well, that's not the version of it that we're talking about here. I'm trying to get people to be focused on, you know, the evenings and the weekends and their time away as being recharging so that way they can show up at their best at work.
Mhm.
And he was so resistant to it. And I was like, well, hey, we don't have to have this kind of
Oh.
subjective conversation. Like we can just go look at the output and the numbers. And if they're slacking, then obviously then this isn't working. You want to go look at that? No, we don't need to go look at that. It's fine, and everything else like that. But it was such a funny conversation because, this was an older CEO, right? So, like I'm thinking,
Yeah.
oh, of anybody, they're gonna appreciate this. And it was so flooring to be validating the concept that like, hey, I'm trying to make sure that your people are resting and recharging in their off time,
So
you
they
know?
do better for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Rule of
My
diminishing
favorite
returns.
is when I'm given a chance to do an experiment of 2 different teams. One that
Oh,
does work hard, take vacations, work hard, take vacations, and one that's like, let's truly optimize your energy, your patterns, your day in a way where you feel like you're thriving. You have white space for thinking as well as
mm,
execution, and let's see how the performance output is in 6 months or in a year of each team.
yeah. Has it ever gone the other way?
No.
Yeah.
Always, people are thriving. They're like, "Wait, what?
Yeah.
I can optimize and my leader's gonna optimize with us and we all get to, like, think about how we would kick ass together?"
Yeah.
And just even that, the given the opportunity to have the autonomy to shape how what their rhythm is gonna be is
Yep.
so empowering for people that they usually just kick it up a notch. Loyalty improves all the things.
Well, I really appreciate the thing that you said about, like, white space, right? Because
Mhm.
before we were turning on the call, we were talking about how we like our days to run, and I'm very much like, I'm a
Yeah.
productivity nut, right? So I like to stack all my calls back up and, like, let's just go. But I also understand the importance of, like, deep work and space, and I just build my days differently than that. But one of the things that I always run into is, like, in sales, everyone is like, "Well, like, my people should be selling all the time." And it's like, not actually, right? That unstructured time of sales is where all the creativity comes in. It's where we kind of play back over the conversation. Okay, what do they really want? Like, what's really going to help
Mhm.
them, and all these other things, right? And so if you're just on calls all the time, there's no room for reflection. Like, I mean, you're not even going to write good follow ups if you're just hopping from call to call to call to call to call, right? So I
Yeah.
remember I was on another project, and the CEO, he was a little hard to handle, and he was coming up, and he was wanting, strategy, like, in a meeting. "Oh, I don't like this. What else you got?" Like, it was just like this, like, instantaneous thing, and there was a woman on the team, and she said this beautiful line, and she goes, "Hey, so, you know, reminder, this is strategy that you're asking for. It doesn't come on a dime. We need a little time to kinda think through this and come back with some ideas." And he goes, "Oh," and just completely heard it and took it, and, I wasn't expecting that response from him, but
Yeah.
I just loved how they were talking about it. Like, strategy does not get formulated right there in the moment. You need that space to think it
Yeah.
through and stuff.
Yeah.
So, changing gears just a little bit, Diana, because I want to
Okay.
be super respectful with your time, and I appreciate you doing this. Um, when you think about performance and culture, right, and
Mhm.
getting the most out of people, what is something that a founder who's new to team building needs to be thinking about so that way they have a shot at building a culture and a team that they're excited about?
Mm. Um, First, I would be really clear about the type of culture you want to build. And for that, I usually tell leaders to really think deeply about their own values. And I don't mean values from a list. I mean, what they value so much every day that they prioritize. And then how can they bring that to the team in a way the team can thrive? And then it really requires having those conversations, and I always recommend it's one-on-one, as well as in a group setting, but really deeply one-on-one, especially with people that operate differently from you as the leader. So let's
Mhm.
say you're a C and they're an I, right? On disc. And so,
I'm already tired. I'm already tired.
right? And so you're trying to set a culture based on C type values.
Mhm.
How do you work with that person? How does that I person first feel about it? And how do you have this really great conversation about how they can bring their I ness into those C values and have the dialogues and have also conversations about making sure that if the leader notices anything that feels like unspoken agreements, unspoken sort of vibes going on, elephants in the room,
Mhm.
that they really are open to having calm and kind conversations with people right away about it. So the culture thrives and is intentional in what they want.
Hmm.
Uh, that's usually the most amount of coaching that I do is kind of role playing those difficult conversations that some leaders just aren't sure how to have with people they lead that have different personalities in themselves.
Yeah. A line from my coach that I think about or try to think about all the time is as a default, people sell the way they wanna be sold to, and they lead the way they wanna be led.
Yeah.
Because for, like, a long time, I'd work for people in sales roles, and I'd get frustrated, I would leave, I'd come back, I'd leave, right? I would kinda move around a lot because I wasn't really sure that I wanted to be in sales, right? But anytime
Mm,
I was working for, like, a bad manager, right, I would leave and I'd put all the blame on them, and it took me a while to realize that I'm also playing a part in that, right? And that if they keep sifting enough, they'll probably maybe find people that they that will respond to that style of leadership and coaching and management, and things will be fine. But I was taking it as like, well, I'm right and you're the idiot, so therefore you're the problem. And it's actually deeper than that, right? Like
yeah.
just because I don't like it doesn't mean that it's categorically bad, But it took
It's
me a
just
very long
different.
time to get to that moment of clarity.
Yeah. And if you're not having that dialogue openly with somebody on how to find a way that works for both of you, yeah, there's all this hidden pissed offness underneath that people never work through. And you can't
Unf
have an optimized team that way.
Cannot. Yeah, if everyone's holding resentment, yeah, you're not gonna get much done. That's interesting.
Oh, here's one of my favorite little phrases. I think it's a Brene Brown phrase. It's resentment is a sign that you're letting your boundaries get walked on, not talking through the things you need.
Ooh, yeah, that feels pretty valid, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just kinda casually thinking it through. Yeah, I can see a lot of value in that idea. That's interesting, right? To me, it's kinda like the things that irritate you in other people are things that you need to be working on in yourself,
Mm,
right? That's
yeah.
that's something to think about all the time. Next question. In the world of social media, everyone has tweets and thought leadership posts and everything. What is a piece of advice that you can appreciate now that you had to learn the hard way yourself?
Um, this probably won't surprise you given the themes that we've had on this call, but definitely if you optimize energy, performance will follow. Or
Mhm.
performance tactics are at least a lot easier once people have their enough energy to like perform well. So often right now, if you look at all the leadership development tactics, all the frameworks and stuff, it's about there's even things out there called the high performance mindset, high performing habits, all of
Mhm.
this. And the underlying way that you function and are the systems optimized and are you optimized is never really looked into and talked about. So that's my little tweet is optimize energy and performance will follow.
I love that.
That was a hard thing to learn. It took me, what, 15, 20 years, so
I mean, I can't tell you how many times my coach had to tell me like, "Hey, you don't have to feel like prospecting. You just need to get it done."
yeah,
Right? I mean, it was an embarrassing number of times before I was just kind of like, "Oh, I don't need to put my thoughts and feelings into this. I just need to like do a good job and be consistent."
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, okay, I can do that.
right?
Just took me a
Just have
while
a
to hear
system.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
have a system that helps everybody. We do not have enough time to try to talk the I types into the fact that they need a system and it just improves their performance. That's like its own mini series. We'd have to record that
yeah.
separately as a masterclass. Um,
To be continued, right?
to be continued, yes. Um, with the things that you've seen and the people that you've worked with and everything, what is your word of warning for someone who's gonna go out on their own today?
Oh, there's so many quick fixes out there that promise to meet you 8, 7, 8 figures in 5 days. I think you said it beautifully earlier, be patient, stick with the process. There are things, systems in place that work. Like, I think be patient was the biggest thing is don't follow the shiny object.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Um, it's gonna I think the line is it's gonna take twice as long and cost twice as much as you're planning, you know?
Oh, yeah, that's true reality.
Just Dana, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
This conversation, I think is gonna help a lot of people. I
Yeah.
really hope that people that are feeling a little burnt out in corporate can hear this, right? And I hope that people that
Mhm.
have left corporate and are struggling can hear that it's, like, worth the effort, right? It's not gonna
Mm,
be easy. Don't expect it to be easy, but you should be building something that is worth your focus, effort, and intention.
yeah. Amen. I love that
Um,
for them too.
if people wanna come hang out with you and learn more about the work that you're doing, maybe see if there's opportunity to work together, where's the best place for them to come hang out with you, keep up with you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn under Diana Urbina, or on our website at Sharo Solutions, SHARRO solutions.com.
Awesome. Diana, thank you so much for doing this. I really do think it's going to help some people and really
Great.
appreciate your time.
Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.